Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to give you a few seconds to get any water, any refreshments, bring it back to your seat, and then we'll start. Good to see you all. Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to give you a few seconds to get any water, any refreshments, bring it back to your seat, and then we'll start. Good to see you all. We just have a few more people checking in. So. Okay, so welcome everyone. It's so good to see so many familiar faces and unfamiliar faces too. So this symposium began as a very tiny idea, and I had a cheerleader behind this idea, Dr. Jay Williams, and also Reverend Sarah Gerard. And basically the idea was to do something very straightforward, which was to center the crucial issue of Black women's health, to center and elevate it, and that's what we're here to do today. So I wanted to begin by framing this issue with the words of one of my foremothers, Audre Lorde, and I wanted to share some statements from Audre. The thing that is so poignant about these statements is that Audre wrote them in an essay in 1977, and they couldn't be more true today. So, this is from Sister Outsider and Audre's Transformation of Silence into Language and Action essay. What are the words you do not have yet? What do you need to say? What are the tyrannies you swallow day by day and attempt to make your own? Until you sicken and die of them, still in silence. She goes on to say, within this country, where racial difference creates a constant, if unspoken, distortion of vision, Black women have, on the one hand, been highly visible, but on the other hand, have been rendered invisible through the depersonalization of racism. And lastly, for us to survive in the mouth of this dragon we call America, we have to learn this fast and most vital lesson, that we were never meant to survive, and that neither were most of you here today, Black or not. And that visibility, which makes us most vulnerable, is that which is also the source of our strength. Because the machine will try to grind you into dust anyway, whether or not we speak. And I'll conclude with these powerful and timely words by Dr. J. Williams. We gather today, all of us, offering our own counterculture, one that doggedly persists against collective amnesia. And this is truly a time of collective amnesia. Knowing that we as Black women, deserve grace, longevity, fruitfulness, and joy. So, thank you for coming. I'm Karen Singleton, member of Union Parish, and I'm so excited to have this symposium here today. And I want to invite Dr. J. Williams up to also welcome you.
I'm Jay Williams, lead pastor of Union. Welcome to this place. We're glad that you are here. On behalf of the community that has loved us into freedom, we stand here. I'm grateful for my great-grandmother, Inez Baz, who took me to church on Easter Sunday, 1985. And she was my first theologian, my first teacher. And I've been going to church ever since. And grateful for the vision of Dr. Karen Singleton. Put your hands together one more time for Karen. As we gather in this place, it strikes me that, and take a look around. Just take a look around and see the beauty that is in this room. And there's more folks gathered online as well. It strikes me that this gathering here on Saturday is as sacred as when we gather on Sunday morning for divine worship, because we are beloved. We are created in God's image, and to center the experiences and the health of Black women, of course, is to free us all, to lead a process into the freedom of us all. And we're just delighted to hold this space in this countercultural way, because we know that given the current state of affairs of our nation, simply to gather with this emphasis is a courageous, a bold, a countercultural act of liberation, of courage, and of liberty. So we're delighted that we get to hold this space, that we get to name things that are important to us, and to deepen our awareness of radical solidarity with Black women, and to begin something that hopefully will continue to flourish. We're all entitled, yes, to flourish, to grow. And here at Union, our values, unconditional love, compassionate service, intersectional justice, Christ's gospel of liberation, racial equity, is what forms this space. So over the next couple of hours, with our keynote, we're delighted to have keynote speaker Lisa here today to guide us, State Senator Liz Miranda, and many others, as we hold the space and workshop, and then we'll conclude at the end with a brief reception, networking, time for us to just be together in community. So if you are happy to be here on this Saturday afternoon, let the church say amen. And put your hands together. I'd like to welcome State Senator Liz Miranda. Oh, Ruby, come on.
afternoon. It is my honor to welcome State Senator Liz Miranda. She's a Massachusetts State Senator serving within her second term as a Senator of the 2nd Suffolk District, representing 9 neighborhoods in Boston. Prior to her time in the Senate, Miranda served as a Massachusetts State Representative, representing the 5th Suffolk District from 2019 to 2022. As the State Chair of the Racial Equity, Civil Rights, and Inclusion Committee, Vice Chair of the Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities Committee, and is also proud to serve on committees related to Ways and Means, the Census, Juvenile and Emerging Adult Justice, Economic Development, and Emerging Technologies, and the Judiciary. Senator Miranda has focused on equity and justice in all of her legislative and budget priorities. Most recently, her maternal health omnibus bill and liquor license bill for the city of Boston were both signed into law by Governor Maura Healey. Miranda was also named one of the Bostonians of the Year by the Boston Globe in 2024 for her work providing 225 new wealth-generating liquor licenses for Boston's neighborhoods who've historically been left behind. Senator Miranda is the co-chair of the Ellen Story Commission on Postpartum Depression and the vice chair of the Massachusetts Black and Latino Legislative Caucus. She is also a member of the National Caucus of Black State Legislators and the Eastern Regional Representative in Nobel, the National Organization of Black Elected Legislative Women, and proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, Incorporated. She serves as the Social Action Co-Chair in the Boston Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority. Senator Miranda is an alumna of Wellesley College and returned to the college in 2021 as their commencement speaker. Miranda is the first Cabo Verdean woman to be elected to the Massachusetts Senate and the 4th Black woman in history. We welcome Senator Miranda.
You ever hear your bio and like who they talking about? So much honor, and before I begin my remarks, just want to center a little bit. You know, this church brings so many memories. The last time I was here was in the celebration of life for Mel King, and he was someone that was a giant, literally and figuratively in my life. 30 years ago in this neighborhood, I was part of a youth organization called My Town, and this community was still a Black community. I went to Braddock to get my ice cream. Slade's was popping, Wally's was popping, the United South End Settlements, teen empowerment. This community was very robust with sort of the history of the ages as this community was transitioning. And it's just a special place, and I just want to remind folks, we're here to talk about Black women's health, but it was the Black grandmothers who stayed the longest, who wanted to retain this community, who protected people in this church, who fed people in this church, who kept their brownstones as long as they could. And there's still a few in the community that we've got to keep protected because gentrification is also very violent. And it impacts our health. And the reason why our community is so weathered oftentimes isn't just about what's happening in our bodies, but what is happening around us in our environment that is toxic stress or generational trauma or the things that are weighing heavy on our shoulders. So they did mention that I'm a state senator. What they didn't mention was that in 2017, I had the worst year of my life. And it's so special today. This is my 6th event. That's not the special part. I'm really tired, but I could not be here today. But what was special about the story is that I didn't run for office traditionally like most people run for office. They think that they have a voice and they want to contribute. I hadn't been in the State House in Massachusetts until I was 30-something years old. And I went to fight for a law that I thought was a terrible law in Massachusetts, that people could not get victims' compensation money, which at the time was less than $8,000, if they had contributed to their own demise. And when we peeled the layers back, what that meant was if young men didn't collaborate with police or were known to be a gang member, they wouldn't receive. Now, mind you, if you've ever buried someone, it costs well over $15,000, right? And so they were withholding the small piece that these families were deserving of, ultimately because many of them were burying their children young. And I had gone to the State House with the Peace Institute and the mothers that had lost their children, and we won. And I was like, wait a minute, what's happening under this golden dome? And I never knew that a few years later, I would have my youngest brother go to a Boston nightclub. His name was Michael. He was a father of 2 young boys, and he never made it home. And I watched the entirety of his last evening on Snapchat, not knowing that it'd be the last time that I was communicating with my brother. And gun violence is a public health crisis. And the carceral system that plagues our community, that incarcerates men and boys and girls and women, is also weighing on our shoulders, because oftentimes who is left to care for the family and care for those, I always say to them, the young homies, because oftentimes they go to a jail for a set and the set never calls them, they never put money in their canteens, they never try to fight for their freedom. It is the grandmothers, it is the women in our communities that take those expensive phone calls, that even if it's just $20, puts it on their books. And that has totally changed the way that I look at politics, because I ran for Michael. Little did I know that me running for Michael and trying to say to Massachusetts, if there's one state in the country that shouldn't have gun violence, it is Massachusetts. We have the lowest number of gun deaths in the nation. We have tough gun laws. Even in the last 3 years, we've actually codified them even more. But for communities like Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, for Holyoke, for Brockton, for Lawrence, for Springfield and Worcester, the communities are still plagued by gun violence, which is often seen as a public safety issue. But when you peel back the layers of why young people are holding guns out of safety or harm that they feel might come to them, is the reason why I ran. And when I got to the State House, I realized that there wasn't one issue that wasn't a Black woman's issue. And particularly learning about the Black maternal health crisis, I felt the same way that I felt about the gun violence epidemic. How could the place with the best hospitals, I live in walking distance of BMC. So many people have told me, you gotta leave Massacast. I'm like, hell no, I ain't going selling grandma's house. But the point is that it's happening here too. And oftentimes in Massachusetts, we have this sense of exceptionalism, right? Blinding ourselves to think that we are not a place that is going through the things that we're going through, and Black women are dying 2 to 3 times the rate of white women still in Massachusetts. And so I spent 6 years working on the issue just to find out last year that conditions got worse for Black women in Massachusetts. So imagine working on something, thinking you're contributing. You know, I extended postpartum coverage. I made sure that doulas could be covered by Mass Health. I was working on this big bill that the governor was gonna sign. And then I learned that actually conditions got worse for me. And so I'm sharing those 2 things because oftentimes we're waiting for other people to spearhead the things that we know is our duty and our assignment. You know, I didn't want to lose my brother. I didn't want to work on Black maternal health crisis because I was tired of walking in rooms and feeling like I was going to die if I gave birth, even here in Massachusetts in a hospital. Like, that is something I never thought about. But I've come to understand that it's my assignment. And so I want to thank you, Karen, for pulling this together. This is actually, out of the 6 events I've been to today, this is the 3rd event focused on health. And I think it's because we're understanding in a time like this, there are a couple of things that are true. We're not going to make it unless we get together as a community, and I mean big C and little c, right? We're not going to survive. But we also understand that if we're not emotionally and physically well, the things that we're working to strive for, whether it's to retain our homes and our communities, or to build better schools, or to have more economic mobility, none of that will matter if we're not well enough to receive and retain those things. And so I hope that today you're inspired, that you think about the possibility. You don't have to have 300 people in a room to make a difference, right? 50, 75, 2, when they're gathered for the right reasons, can make a huge difference, not only in our city and in the Commonwealth. And so, although I was like, oh, rush, and I couldn't get in the door, I was like, please, Pastor, let me in. I wanted to make sure that this is a moment that you guys have taken your Saturday. It's a rainy day outside, but that you really learn and listen to what's being shared today and have a fruitful discussion and hold your elected officials accountable. I am one of 4 Black women in the entirety of the history of the Commonwealth. There are 2 Black women serving in the Senate right now, me and Senator Edwards. This is the 2nd time it's happened, and that is the entirety of the Black women's history here in the Commonwealth. But we've been here since 1637. It didn't take 1993 for the first Black woman to be elected to the legislature in the Senate, or 73 with Doris Bunty, for us to realize that this city and this community has been built on our backs, and we have something to say. And so I think it's incredibly timely that you brought us together. And I'm looking forward. I just made a connection with Lisa around reparative justice. We have 2 bills in the Commonwealth on reparations, and they haven't gone anywhere. And I think they can go somewhere if we come together to really work on that. Because what Sister Audrey said, you know, you got to speak even if your voice is shaking, right? So I hope you enjoy your afternoon, you're inspired, and if anybody want to reach out to me, you guys know how to find me. And I just hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and to never forget joy, even in the stories that I shared about learning about the crisis, about being sad about losing my brother. Great things have happened by taking my pain and turning it into purpose. And I know for each of you in this room, there is something that keeps you up at night. There is something that makes you want to go harder in the spaces that you're in to try to make it better for somebody else. And just lean in on that. And that's your guiding star. That's your assignment. And I think all of us have a special assignment. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Senator Miranda. So I'm here to introduce Lisa Holder, who has turned pain into justice and a lot of experiences into justice in a very profound way, which had a huge amount of impact. So I'm just going to read Lisa's bio to give you a little background about Lisa. Lisa is the president of the Oakland-based Equity Justice Society, EJS, known for her groundbreaking appointment as a member of the California Reparations Task Force and more than 20 years of experience as a civil rights litigator and scholar. Lisa has made EJS a leader and the premier coalition partner in the reparations movement in California and also nationally. Under Lisa's directorship, EJS continues to build its dynamic civil rights practice to dismantle discriminatory school discipline and the school-to-prison pipeline. It also creates a just and equitable legal system, promotes and protects Black women's health, and combats white supremacy and the extremist forces that threatens the multiracial democracy for which we all should strive. That's a mouthful, but a really important mouthful. Time selected Lisa for her 2025 the closers list of 25 Black leaders working to end inequality. Ms. Holder is a nationally recognized award-winning trial attorney specializing in equal protection, education equity, employment discrimination, constitutional policing, and international human rights law. In 2019, she drafted AB 241 and 242, the law that now requires all judges, attorneys, and court staffs and health professionals to undertake continuing education on bias elimination. In 2020, Lisa served on the steering committee for the Proposition 16 campaign to repeal California's ban on affirmative action. In 2021, she was among the principal attorneys who litigated the groundbreaking case that eliminated the use of SAT and ACT in California's higher education system. Ms. Holder received her Bachelor's of Arts degree from Wesleyan University and her JD from NYU, where she was a distinguished Root Tilden Scholar. And lastly, as my closest friend, I wanted to add, I can testify that Lisa was thinking about these issues. She was curious and committed to social justice when we were in kindergarten, and thinking about how we were not being treated as fairly as the other kindergartners, and discussing this on our stoop in Brooklyn. So she has a long history of fighting injustice, and I am so proud of her today and proud to introduce her.
Karen is truly my sister of the spirit. I was so lucky to find her half a century ago at this point. I do a lot of thought leadership, and I must admit that in these days, it's hard to know what to say to people to stabilize them and restore their sense of belonging. There's so much engineered chaos and ugliness that's thrown at us minute to minute. The apex predators are ripping the rug from under us, hoping that we fall into the sunken place. Remember that the ground lies beneath the rug, holding us firm. Stay grounded and sure-footed. If you stumble for a moment, that's okay. We're all human. Just find your footing, rise, stand 10 toes down for equality, the rule of law, equity, and inclusive democracy. Equality, the rule of law, equity, and inclusive democracy. This is our ideological North Star, and I hope to offer some tools to help us stay tethered to this North Star and sustain us as we undergo this threat of authoritarianism. As Dr. Singleton stated in her gracious introduction, I am the president of the Equal Justice Society. A quarter century ago, civil rights icons Eva Patterson and Professor Charles Ogletree founded the Equal Justice Society to push back on the notion that race no longer matters and colorblindness is the standard bearer for constitutional interpretation and lawmaking in the courts. When Equal Justice Society came online in the year 2000, the first Black woman on the federal bench, Judge Constance Baker Motley, famously said, "Now I can rest." 25 years later, we are movement lawyers grounded in constitutional scholarship and social science. We are activists with litigation expertise, and we understand that laws are made in the legislature and in the court, and that grassroots movements can be the primary catalyst for law and policy that expands civil rights, racial justice, and inclusive democracy. Nonprofits like the Equal Justice Society are the apparatus, other than voting, that allow the people to exercise power and shape democracy. You all can partner with nonprofits, whether it's through financial support or thought partnership, in service of people-powered democracy.
For me, this work, civil rights, democracy expansion, is not a job. It's not even just a profession. It is a vocation that I have been committed to for as long as I can remember. It is indeed a ministry, which explains why I'm here preaching to a multitude in a church, calling upon my minister's voice to reach your minds and hearts. And speaking of hearts and minds, social and racial justice advocacy is a balance of head work and heart work. It is quantitative and qualitative. It is both data-driven and narrative-driven. It is lifting disparity data and anecdotal personal stories that shine a light on America's continuing racial pathology. Which is why it's so important to have social scientists, artists, academics, medical professionals, theologians as partners and anchors in the liberation movement. So what can social scientists, artists, healthcare workers, theologians, academics, activists, lawyers, students, frontline workers, critical thinkers, and change makers like yourself do to make liberation, decolonization, racial justice, and inclusive democracy a sustainable reality? Do your duty as engaged citizens and professionals and share your stories and your data. Generate research methodologies, best practices, and disciplined academic frameworks that will serve as the scholarly underpinning for the movement. Advocate for protection and expansion of disaggregated disparity data, which is under attack. Educate the public on why data is crucial for making evidence-based policy. Provide the metrics and data sets that measure outcomes and that connects the dots between historical discrimination and ongoing discriminatory practices and outcomes. Tell us your stories and the stories of your neighbors and friends through provocative artwork that shows us the legacy of harm that we continue to experience on a day-to-day basis. This empirical data, narrative data, and data analysis you all provide is actually critical for movement lawyers because that's how we show judges and other lawmakers that race-conscious policy is aligned with and not contrary to equal protection and equality as outlined by the Constitution. So for example, the disaggregated data on Black maternal health tracks the abominable disparities between Black and white birthing mothers and infants. Black women nationally are 3 to 4 times more likely to die during childbirth or from pregnancy-related causes than white women. Black women are the most educated demographic in America, but irrespective of education, these maternal health disparities persist. Black women with post-secondary degrees are 3 times more likely to die from childbirth-related causes than white women who don't even have high school degrees. This tells us that the racial pathology and anti-Black hate is deeply rooted in the medical field, and we need doula programs and health equity programs that center the needs of pregnant Black women to keep Black women and babies safe. This is not reverse discrimination. This is what do no harm means in action. Black newborns are 4 times more likely to die if they are delivered by white doctors as opposed to doctors of color. The reverse is not true for white newborns delivered by doctors of color. This tells us representation in healthcare matters, and we need race-conscious admissions and licensing policies and pipeline programs to bring in more Black doctors and health workers. Do you know that there are less Black doctors today than there were in 1910? And that is purposeful. This is not reverse racism. This is do no harm in action. In San Francisco, the wealthiest city in the wealthiest country, Black newborns are 6 times more likely to die during their first year than white infants. This tells us that we need public health programs to protect and support Black families with infants and Black infants in the first year of life. This is not anti-whiteness. This is anti-racism. 60% of medical students and 25% of attending physicians believe that Black people have thicker skin and feel less pain than people of other races, even though this conclusion is unscientific, unsupported, and biologically unsound. This tells us that we must have implicit bias education and bias unlearning programs for medical students and doctors. This is not wokeness indoctrination. This is how you do no harm. As a practitioner, I assure you that this type of quantitative analysis and data helps us protect and expand civil rights wins and lays the foundation for fairness and multiracial inclusive democracy. Okay, so we have established that reasonable, caring, critical thinkers like yourselves are frontline soldiers in the real-time battle to preserve our democracy. I hope you will lean into a certain set of touchstones to prime you for battle and sustain you on the front. Lean into reason, science, empiricism, and narratives with historical integrity. Evidence-based, historically contextualized policies are anchors for equality and the rule of law. Reject the apex predators, ahistorical, irrational, post-democracy, anti-science, anti-truth, disinformation narratives. People without a past have no foundation for a sustainable future. Lean into abundance and scarcity frames. And this reminds me of what the senator was saying about not giving victims compensation because of who they are and where they came from. If the pie is redistributed away from its current regressive configuration where 1% of the people and the military-industrial complex receives the vast percentage of the nation's wealth, and toward equal shares for all, then given the wealth of this nation, there is more than enough for everyone to take a seat at the table and have a satisfying piece of pie, instead of 99% fighting for the crumbs under the table. Begin with the whole pie, not the crumbs, to create an abundance frame as the jumping off point for your academic analysis, your civil rights contributions in service of inclusive multiracial democracy. Lean into hope and lean into woke. The segregationist, insurrectionist army is on the march. They have doubled down on white supremacy, packaging it as an even more aggressive myth of meritocracy and colorblindness called anti-woke. The emotional current for this political ideology is cynicism, nihilism, and fragility that obliterates hope. These psychodynamic and ideological frames are being deployed to dismantle civil rights and inclusive democracy by rebranding all civil rights and non-binary agendas as wokeness and reverse racism. Understand that equity, equality, opportunity, fairness, it is not just a notion or a fad in identity politics. It is the rule of law, and until the courts and the legislators and all three branches of government come to a consensus otherwise, instead of this unilateral power grab by any one of those branches, the equity, equality, and equal opportunity trifecta remains the rule, not the exception. Our first duty as good citizens and conscientious professionals is to honor the social compact and comply with equity and inclusion because it is good policy and it is the law. So just let me be clear here. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility practices are good for outcomes. They are moral, and they are the key to compliance with civil rights laws that democracy coalitions have labored to pass over the last 75 years. Executive orders do not amend these laws. Lean into pro-democracy and anti-fascism movements as an ideological North Star. Now, scholars who study the rise and fall of authoritarianism observe that the window of time to disrupt and kill an emerging authoritarian regime is very short, 2 years max. And you must lead the counterinsurgency against despotism with an organizing concept that captivates the national consciousness and offers a viable, positive, alternative worldview. To help disrupt the authoritarian onslaught, tether your research and analysis and activism to affirmative pro-democracy visions. Find mission partners in the nonprofit sector to apply and leverage your research in service of pro-democracy power-building movements. Now, I myself lean into reparations and harm repair as the guiding principle, a positive, inclusive mission for repairing the nation and healing America of its racial pathology that began and continues with anti-Black and anti-Indian hate. So now, if you are already actively engaged in civil society pro-democracy efforts, lean into your proactive programmatic agendas and affirmative mission statements. The best defense is a strong offense. So lean into proactive missions instead of doubling down on reactive, piecemeal damage control agendas, especially when using social science and litigation and activism. We cannot abandon our long-term programmatic agendas for social justice because we are scrambling to combat the chaotic barrage of unlawful executive orders. Now, notably, last week we observed the 5-year memorial of the brutal murder of Mr. George Floyd. So now, if you committed to anti-racism, racial justice, and anti-fascism in the 2020 Summer of Reckoning, then recommit and stand firm to uplift policies that repair the harm and legacy of racial injustice, from diversity, equity, and inclusion, to critical race studies, to implicit bias research and development, to multicultural education, to abolition, to reparations. These are race-conscious policies that repair the nation and undergird a more perfect union. Lean into intersectionality and decolonization constructs. Race, religion, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, disability, class, indigeneity are categories that have been weaponized by colonizers for centuries as wedges to divide us. We must strive to unlearn the mainstream mentality that these identities are siloed and hierarchical. We need to remap and decolonize our thinking, adapting a new vision that braids the categories together to reflect our lived experience as beings with complex, overlapping identities. This abundance approach to identity builds more bridges for understanding between people who share common identifiers, and it surfaces sustainable alliances that transcend wedge politics. The practical way to do this is to lean into cross-racial allyship and solidarity. I'll provide some affirmations that help us lean into multiracial allyship. The fate of each minority depends upon the extent of justice given all other groups. So said core founder Ina Sugihara. The price of liberation of the white people is the liberation of the Blacks, the total liberation in the cities, in the towns, before the law, and in the mines. So said James Baldwin. When spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion. African proverb. Along these same lines, lean into inclusivity, lifting universal truths and shared values that welcome all people into the democracy expansion conversation. Lean into succession and legacy. Multi-generational movements are sustainable movements. This moment is just a snapshot in time, so don't get hysterical and panic. Think of this movement for inclusivity, racial justice, democracy expansion as a 100-year movement, and accept that you will not make it to the end, but that your contribution through mentorship and succession planning enlists the next generation of change makers and is the catalyst for the future transformation. Sadly, the anti-woke segregationist insurgents are ahead of the curve on this legacy thinking. They have been organizing a multi-generational exclusion movement to roll back inclusive democracy and undo our civil rights wins for 75 years, since Brown v. Board of Ed, and for 50 years since Roe v. Wade. We must quickly pivot to this legacy strategy for sustainable democracy, and many of you who are educators are perfectly positioned to lead it, given your proximity to students and young minds. Now, in California, which is where I live, as part of our reparations lawmaking work, we are leaning into all of these touchstones. In 2021, California's governor convened the first statewide reparations task force to undertake a 2-year study of the case for reparations. In 2023, the 9-person task force, which I was privileged to be a part of, delivered an 1,100-page book of truth, the California Task Force Report for Reparations, that painstakingly laid out the harms of 250 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow segregation, and 75 years of post-civil rights apartheid, and California's complicity in these systems. The report provided a roadmap for repairing continuing harms and compensating Black Californians for the devastating mental, emotional, financial, and opportunity costs evidenced in the gaps that we see in wealth, health, life expectancy, education, home ownership, and incarceration. The task force proposed 115 bills for the legislature to pass to repair the harm. Those bills are about much more than a check in the mail. Those bills they seek to reconstitute, to remake, to renovate all of the systems and infrastructures that were originally designed to do harm to Black communities, and in so doing, abate and remediate that harm by finally centering the needs of Black Californians in our systems of education, wealth building, criminal legal, housing systems, etc. 2 years after the task force laid out the roadmap for harm repair, we have built a multiracial, multi-sector, multi-generational coalition that is 45 civil rights organizations strong, united under one banner, the Alliance for Reparations, Reconciliation, and Truth. We call it ART. Critical thinkers of all ages, races, religions, gender identities are fighting in solidarity for reparations for slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, and continuing harms engendered by this legacy of anti-Blackness, and for land back and sovereignty for indigenous people. In the last legislative session in California, the first 8 reparations bills were passed. Historic. The governor earmarked $12 million to move reparations legislation forward. Historic. In this legislative session, the California Legislative Black Caucus introduced 14 more reparations bills straight out of the task force report. Historic. For those who say reparations can't happen in America, hear me now. It is happening in California. California is committed to getting at the root of our failing democracy by treating the origin of our discontent, the racial pathology grounded in anti-Black and anti-Indigenous hate that began 400 years ago and continues to divide us today. The coalition EJS helped to build, ART, is centering Black and Indigenous people in the multiracial democracy building and nation-healing effort in order to finally manifest the promise of a more perfect union with harm repair as the catalyst. And I hope you will support this reparations effort by joining 700 national organizations as endorsers of the California Reparations Task Force Report at www.supportreparations.org. So you can sign on right now to support the work that we're doing on reparations in California. So we are living in the most disingenuous times, so lean into radical truth-telling as your North Star for public communications and media engagement. This power grab to eliminate democracy targets communications, narrative, and media messaging. On social media, vet and combat white supremacist, misogynistic, homophobic, disinformation, and misinformation packaged as catchy sound bites about anti-woke. Lift up fact-based, science-based, historically accurate messages grounded in truth. And as tempting as it might be to hide your head in the sand and disengage, opting out is not an option right now. Stay awake, stay woke, exercise critical thinking, consume news, media, and information mindfully and intentionally, but not indiscriminately, because the constant barrage of bad news is designed to deplete you and make you less effective. Never be afraid to speak truth to power. That's what Karen and I were doing in kindergarten. We were speaking truth to power on the stoop. As Dr. King said, society's punishments are small compared to the wounds we inflict on our souls when we look the other way. Finally, as I said in the beginning, this is heart work more than head work. So lean in to joy and love. I'm going to +1 the senator on that, on joy and love. Do not give them your hope or let them take your joy. It is through hope, love, and joy that Black folks survived the unsurvivable, held on to our minds while experiencing the unthinkable, sustained our humanity when they did everything inhumanly possible to turn us into beasts, fought and came out as victors when the fight was unwinnable, and continued to love ourselves and each other despite being told that we were unlovable. So said Dr. Toni Morrison, and oh, my people out yonder, hear me. They do not love your neck unnoosed and straight. So love your neck. Put a hand on it, grace it, stroke it, and hold it up. And all your inside parts that they just as soon slop for hogs. You got to love them. The dark, dark liver, love it, love it. And the beating heart, love that too. More than eyes or feet, more than lungs that have yet to draw free air. More than your life-holding womb and your life-giving private parts. Hear me now. Love your heart, for this is the prize. Onward.
So thank you so much, Lisa. We are going to be moving into the second part now, which is the workshops. And I wanted to see if there are any housekeeping pieces we should say. JJ, Dr. Williams, do you want to add any housekeeping notes?
First of all, give it up once more for Lisa Holder. A brilliant, brilliant start to our afternoon. Yes, in terms of housekeeping, there's 3 spaces that our 2 workshop sessions will happen in. Here in the sanctuary, and of course there's refreshments in the rear. And then downstairs, Cooper Hall. You can access Cooper Hall by a set of stairs to your left behind you. And then there's also an accessible lift out this door in case you would like to use that. And then the second space, the Connection Center, you can just go back through either of the doors and just follow the hallway into the Connection Center. All rooms have refreshments. We're trying to curate a space where we can be in great conversation with one another. In terms of restrooms, there's a restroom here to your right, and there's an accessible one in the office out this door in the hallway to the Connection Center, and then those are non-gendered, and then there's gendered restrooms, 2 male, 2 female, down on Cooper Hall. And I should just say that as we make our way through this space, you're at home. We say every Sunday, and it applies here on this Saturday, that at Union, your family. So let us know if you need anything. And be sure at the conclusion of our conversation, the book talk, we'll have a reception in the Connection Center with some wine and cheese to be able to just culminate the day together.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Williams. So for now, we will all either disperse if you're going to one of the other two spaces, if you're staying for the workshops that are going to be happening in this space. Oh, we have a question. Hi, Jess. Yes, we're a little tad over. We waited for the senator to come, so we're going to try. We're going to be a little bit, maybe 10 minutes behind. We're going to try to compact things so we're not running too late. So thank you. But each room has a host. So the host is going to read the bios, manage the schedule, give out the refreshments. So when you get to the room, the host will introduce themselves. Hi. Oh, do you have the schedule? There's a little paper. Okay, so do you know which one you would like to go to? Okay, so do you want to tell me which one, and I'll tell you which room? Okay, the first one, this sanctuary, which is where we are now, is going to be Dr. Owusu. She's going to be in here. And then in the Connection Center, Dr. David is going to be presenting in there, right? And then Dr. Sass is going to be in Cooper Hall. No? Oh, is that it? Yes? Okay. I was doing that sort of like off the top of my head, so I wanted to make sure. Okay. 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 Any other questions? Okay. All right. Okay, so we'll reorganize ourselves, and then your host will greet you in that room.